Hi, everyone. This is your host, Kristen Howe, and I am so excited to welcome you to our call with our guest today, Brent Phillips. Brent was an MIT-trained engineer who was disabled for 7 years until he experienced a miracle when his injured arm instantly healed from a single session on energy healing. Today, he is widely considered a master healer, is a best-selling author, and is the creator of the Formula for Miracles energy healing system and the patent-pending Formula for Miracles audio technology. And on today's call with Brent, you will discover how spiritual awakening can lead to the beginning of the end of suffering. You'll find out the 3 stages of a spiritual journey. You'll discover the great lie responsible for most of the suffering in the world, and you'll get an amazing shortcut that leads to spiritual liberation. So I can't wait for this. This is such an amazing call. I can't wait to share Brent with you. Brent, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Of course. I love being able to talk with you and share you with everyone, and I would love if you could share a little bit of your story so that we can understand, that the miraculous healing and all of that, so that we can understand some of the major turning points for you that have brought you to the very high level of success that you have today.
Sure. It's really interesting because I'm always the first to admit that I never really expected to do this. It was never part of my master plan to be a healer or a spiritual teacher. As they say, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And so my other plans was I was going to go out and become a tech giant and make millions of dollars in technology and software. And it didn't work out so well for me. It ended up being quite a disaster. And through a long process, which I'll explain in just a minute, here I am ending up as a full-time healer and spiritual teacher. Because really, if you get to know me, you'll find I'm very much just your typical computer geek. When I was a boy, I was fascinated by electronics. I really loved a lot of the early video games like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and Space Invaders. And I was really into science fiction and fantasy, loved King Arthur and Star Wars and Star Trek and all that kind of stuff. And so when it came time for me to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, it was a pretty easy decision. Because the one thing that I was good at and that somebody would pay me for was programming computers. So I decided to go to college at MIT to study software engineering. And it was at MIT where I discovered the internet. And I know that sounds kind of funny today, especially to our younger listeners. But years ago, the internet was far from mainstream. It was only even heard of by defense contractors and some advanced research universities. And so during my time in college, I fell in love with the internet. And I just saw this amazing potential for this online world that would really change society. And it has, even more so than I had expected. And so I got my bachelor's degree at MIT. I continued on in graduate school there. I was part of the Laboratory for Computer Science in the Telemedia Networks and Systems group under Professor Tennenhouse. And long story short, I got my master's degree. I was qualified into the PhD program and working towards my doctorate when the internet boom hit. And I like to joke that, unlike Al Gore, I actually am someone who helped to invent the internet. So I admit that I was a very small cog in a very large wheel. And so I didn't want to miss out on that. And so I left graduate school, recruited my lifelong best friend and another partner, and we started a web design company. And so things got off to a great start. The very first website I ever developed in my entire life was actually the website for the launch of the Sony PlayStation. So things were really going well at first. We got a lot of high-profile contracts. We had a handful of Fortune 500 clients. We did websites for several divisions of Sony, the PlayStation website. We did the Disneyland website. We did the Nissan Motors website, and a lot of really cool high-profile work. In fact, things were going so well that my partners and I decided to start a second company to create revolutionary online games, because we saw that as being really the future. So long story short, things went great for a while. I had 15 people working for me. And then it all started to go down the toilet because I started to have a lot of pain. Because the little secret to these companies was that I was working myself literally at a superhuman level. For about 2 or 3 years, I was there 80, 100 hours a week, because it was 7 days a week, early morning, late night, every day. No vacations, no weekends, no holidays, no downtime, really all I did for a couple of years was worked, ate, slept, and got a little bit of exercise once a week.
Wow.
At the time, I figured it was an acceptable sacrifice that I would give up a couple of my years working all the time in order to make millions of dollars on one of my companies. Instead, I developed a devastating case of repetitive stress injuries. And so I started to have tingling and pain in my elbows and my wrist, my shoulders, my neck. And long story short, I went to doctors, and they threw splints at me and told me to take anti-inflammatories and sent me through physical therapy. And I actually spent the next 3 years trying all sorts of conventional treatments to try to get better. Long story short, it didn't work. Instead of getting better, I just got worse and worse. I had more pain, more movement restriction, and I was barely able to work even an hour a day on the keyboard without intense pain. And so that's when everything kind of fell apart all at once. I went through my first dark night of the soul, as they call it. And that's when everything in your life just goes to heck all at once. And so for me, there were a couple of things that happened all at about the same time. One was that my doctors officially gave up on me. They diagnosed me as permanent and stationary. And that's work comp lingo that means you're never going to get better, no matter how much treatment you get. And so they literally said, we don't even want to waste our time seeing you because there's no chance you're ever going to get better. And so that was devastating. I had a world-class orthopedist, one of the best-known doctors in the country, look him in the eye and say, Brent, I hope you can find someone to take care of you until you die, because you're never going to be able to work. You're never going to be out of pain. You're never going to have a normal life. So that was devastating. And right around the same time, we had a bunch of disasters with the game company. Our company had been terminated without cause 3 times by publishers. What that means is that we did everything right, met every milestone, met every deliverable, every deadline. Everything we did was perfect. But they terminated the contract anyway, usually because the company went out of business and went bankrupt, or they closed the entire division in North America, or things like that. And so that was a big disaster. And so the third thing that happened, which I call the cherry on top of the sundae, was that I found out that my lifelong best friend and business partner, who, again, it was my idea to start these companies. Him and his other partner had been doing small-time computer repair. And it was my ideas that built them into this multi-million-dollar, worldwide interactive consulting organization. And so they had decided that I wasn't worth it anymore. And so I lost my job, lost my salary, lost my stakes in the multi-million-dollar company. And I found out that my lifelong best friend had been secretly dating the woman I was in love with. So it was a wipeout on all levels. I was in chronic pain, told there was no chance of recovery, no matter what I did. I didn't have any money. I was living at home. I had a terrible broken heart. And it seemed like, all this opportunity and promise was totally gone. So I was really depressed. Fortunately, I didn't stay depressed for too long because I had a friend of mine turn me on to positive thinking. And so nowadays we call it the law of attraction. And so I went to positive thinking weekends and put power words on my wall, and I made a vision board and said my mantras 108 times a day and joined a mastermind group and all that stuff. And it made me feel a little better, but several months into it, nothing had changed. My health hadn't improved. I wasn't making money. I wasn't dating anybody. Nothing improved. So I decided it was just a bunch of bunk. Later, I realized that was a short-sighted decision, but that's how I felt at the time. So again, I got depressed, drank a lot, but fortunately, I didn't stay stuck there for too long, as I had another friend of mine turn me on to alternative medicine. And so when I first got involved with alternative medicine, I thought, wow, this is great. And I really believed that alternative medicine was going to be able to get me better, where conventional medicine had literally given up on me. And so, long story short, I spent the next 5 years as a full-time patient pursuing all sorts of conventional and alternative remedies. I won't bore you with the full list, but I tried all the obvious stuff. I went to Reiki healers and pranic healers, and I got acupuncture, and I took herbs, and I went to a homeopath and an osteopath, and I had the tissue manipulation done and postural therapy, and I learned ergonomics, and I did yoga and Pilates and breath work, and on and on and on. I had all this crazy assortment of healing devices and machines. I used electric stimulators. I used ultrasound. I used subsonic stimulators, vibration machines, chi machines, special oscillators, cold lasers, on and on and on. I have a closet full of just about every health gadget made during that period of time. And nothing helped me. No matter how much work I did, I didn't get better. And a pattern emerged. And this was the pattern. I'd find a new person. They'd have a healing technique, or they'd have a supplement, or they'd have a device or something, right? And I'd tell them my story, and they'd say, you know what, Brent, I'm so glad you found me, because I have exactly what you need to get better. And I'd get all excited, and I'd sign up, and I would, do their technique, or take their supplement, or do their diet, or do their cleanse, or buy their machine, right? And then inevitably 6 months, a year, 2 years later, they'd shrug their shoulders and go, I don't get it. Seems to work for everyone else but you. Sorry. And this didn't just happen 2 or 3 times. This happened dozens of times. I think in 2003, I made a list of all the people that I had worked with seriously, and there were 54 doctors, therapists, and healers on the list. Just so you know, when I say I did acupuncture, I don't mean I had 10 sessions. When I say I did acupuncture, what I mean is I had 2 sessions a week for a year and a half.
Wow.
So nothing worked for me. And so when it got even worse, if you can believe that, and long story short, I had an experimental surgery on my elbow. And when I woke up after the surgery, my arm was totally frozen. I couldn't move it at all. And so it was stuck like that for 4 months. And after 4 months, I had my aunt, Lauren, refer me to a healer. And I went to have a session. She was a Wharton School MBA and had worked for like 20 years with my aunt doing high finance. And she had a major health crisis that almost killed her. And she found this energy healing technique involving the use of conscious theta brainwaves. And not only did it save her life, but she was so impressed with it, she walked away from her really successful career in finance to be a full-time healer. And so I admit, when I heard this, I thought she was nuts. I figured, well, another one's gone off the deep end of the new age pool, right? And I went to see her, and she basically explained to me, she said, Brent, one of the reasons positive thinking doesn't work is most of your power of creating your reality is in the unconscious or subconscious mind. And so by using muscle testing, you can identify subconscious blocks. And by using energy healing techniques from a theta brain state, you can actually reprogram the subconscious mind and heal the body. And that made sense to me, because it sounded a lot like software, because I used to be a software engineer. And so we had a session, and she asked me a lot of questions, and we talked about my parents and what happened when I was growing up and what happened with my best friend and some of the troubles in my first marriage and my belief about God. And it was all very interesting. But the whole time I'm kind of wondering, I'm like, hey, you know what? It's all well and good to sit and talk about your feelings, but I'm here because I can't move my arm and I'm in pain and I want to go back to work, right? So at the end of the session, she said, okay, Brent, we're going to heal your arm. And I was like, yeah, great. Go crazy, right? Take a number. Everyone else. Right? I honestly did not expect anything to happen. So I'm just sitting there looking out the window, and she kind of goes into a trance, into this meditative state. And about a minute later, something popped in my elbow. And I was like, whoa. And she kind of opened her eyes and smiled and said, okay, Brent, try your arm. And I did, and I could move my arm again. It was just like the surgery had never happened. It was genuinely a 100% permanent, instant, miraculous healing. And so that's what hooked me into this stuff. And that's the moment I devoted my life to the study and mastery of energy healing and spirituality. But before we talk about how that works, I like to emphasize and be very clear about this. As an engineer and a scientist, it rubs me the wrong way because I see a lot of people making a lot of claims that aren't necessarily valid. And so I want everyone listening to be very clear on exactly what did and did not happen that day. What did happen is that I experienced a miraculous instant healing. It really was a miracle. She's sitting across the room from me, and something pops in my elbow, and all of a sudden I can move my arm. And I never had any more trouble with that again. So a miracle really did happen. What did not happen that day was that all of my problems were not solved in an hour. The years of chronic pain, the back pain, the neck pain, the stiffness, depression, struggles with money, social anxiety, difficulty in relationships, parent issues, on and on and on. None of that stuff instantly healed. But I did overcome all those other things. It just took a lot more time and a lot more work and a lot more healing as well as other things. And so I really want to emphasize that what I really have to offer here isn't so much a magic wand that you wave and make all your problems go away. That does happen. And I even offer 110% miracle money back guarantee on my training classes, meaning that if you take one of my classes and you use this stuff and you don't see some sort of miracle happen, I'll give you all your money back and 10% for your trouble. But here's the kicker. You don't get to pick the miracles. The miracles will pick you. And so what we're really doing here, if we want to look under the surface to understand, okay, what's really going on? Is there really a scientific basis for energy healing and the law of attraction? And I spent a lot of years trying to figure this out because too much of this work is cloaked in a well-intentioned but not useful New Age mysticism and a lot of feel-good nonsense. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just not the essence of the work. It's kind of like a hot tub. I sit in a hot tub because it makes me feel good. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I don't expect my hot tub to make me rich. And so that's kind of the same thing with New Age energy healing law of attraction. You want to understand exactly what it is, and there's nothing wrong with feel good. But if you're looking to make serious change in your life, that's not going to help you. And so the way it really works is that all of us, unknowingly and unconsciously, are creating our lives through subconscious programming. And I'd say at least 99% of what happens to us is coded into the subconscious. In other words, if you get sick, if you get hurt, if you lose money, if you have a nasty breakup, whatever it is, none of that is a coincidence. All of it is chosen by you for specific purposes. But in order to understand that grand plan, you need to look in the subconscious. And so quite simply, the human body and the mind act like software in the same way that computers run on software. And so if you sit at your computer and you're using your word processor, for example, and it crashes, you know there's something wrong with the code, right? And so because we know the way a computer works is there's code on the hard drive, which gets loaded into memory, and that code then creates the images that appear on the screen, right?
Yep.
And so our lives work the same way. We have codes and programs inside of us for our career, for how much money we make, for our friendships, for our love life, for our intuitive development, for our happiness, for our mood, for everything. These are all just programs sitting on the hard drive. And so if you want to make serious, permanent, effective change in your life, you need to get in and modify that code, right? And the way that most of us are trained to live our lives is totally backwards. The way that most of us are trained to live our lives is pretty much as if you're having trouble with your software. So you start drawing on your monitor to try to fix the bugs. Now, that's ridiculous, right? We all know that drawing on the monitor cannot fix your code. It can, at best, create a temporary illusion that the code is fixed, right? And so, but most of us, that's how we approach our health. That's how we approach money. That's how we approach love. We run around drawing on the monitor trying to fix our code. And so doctors are an expert at this. Most of the time, there are exceptions, but most of the time, the Western medicine paradigm doesn't want to solve your problem by fixing the code. They want to make you pay them to go and redraw your monitor every single day for the rest of your life. Because if you fix the code, then it's done once and for all, right? You don't need them anymore.
Yeah.
And so the entire industry is corrupted. They want to get you to require all these different drugs and treatments just to keep you functional for the whole rest of your life. You can see how that's basically drawing on the monitor. You're not actually fixing the problem. You're just creating an illusion that the symptoms has disappeared. And so what I want to offer is what I call the toolkit for higher dimensional living. I want to give you the tools you need to go in and get to that code. And this is how it works. This is a great secret that I haven't seen presented anywhere else. The subconscious mind is the interface between the human and the law of attraction or the whole rest of the universe. In other words, if you want to see real results from the law of attraction, you need to learn how to talk to it. And saying your mantras and joining mastermind groups and making vision boards, dancing on the stage, high-fiving your friends, there's nothing wrong with that. But most of the time, the law of attraction will ignore it. Why? Because it communicates primarily through the subconscious mind. So, simple example, let's say you go to a wealth building seminar and they have you dance on the stage and high-five your friends and yell out at the top of your lungs, "I'm a millionaire." Okay, that's not a bad thing. No harm done. That's probably a good thing. The trouble is that that's the conscious mind, which is at most 1% of your power. The subconscious mind, on the other hand, may be chock full of blocks and programs, things like I have a vow of poverty, or I have to be poor to be close to God, or rich people are greedy. And so it's sending a much louder, much more powerful signal to the law of attraction saying, don't you dare make us wealthy. We need to be poor for all these reasons. And so the essence of this whole industry is that if you want to see some results, you need to learn how to work with that code. Because the software inside of you, what I call the software of your soul, is the interface between your life and the law of attraction. And so if you want to tell the law of attraction to give you something, you do so through that interface. You do so by programming your consciousness for wealth, for prosperity, for love, for health. So that is the most basic essence of higher dimensional living. However, I'm actually here today to talk about something revolutionary. To give you just a tiny little more of my story, when I experienced the miracle with my elbow in 2003, that was a big turning point in my life. I decided to study and practice energy healing as a professional. A year later, I started my company, and that's what I've been doing full-time ever since. However, even after years as a professional healer and doing literally thousands of sessions with other healers and going to 100 seminars, working with all sorts of different systems and teachers, I was still struggling in a lot of areas. In fact, in 2008, I got unknowingly involved in an investment scam and lost everything. My whole life savings ended up bankrupt. Also had a terrible, terrible heartbreak. So I knew that even though the subconscious reprogramming was a really important thing, I had seen literally hundreds of miracles at that point. I was still suffering, and I knew I was missing something. And it took me several years to find the answer. And so the answer is quite simple, though not necessarily easy to explain. The answer is that our entire society, including all these new age processes of energy healing and mind power and the law of attraction, they're all built on a foundation of a great lie. In other words, everything you thought you knew to be true about your life, about the world, everything that seems intuitive and rational is actually somewhere between totally wrong and incomplete. And so I didn't experience my own genuine spiritual awakening until 2012. And it was in the study of non-duality, also known as Advaita Vedanta. And like I'm sure a lot of the listeners, I had studied non-duality before, and you know what? For the most part, it doesn't make sense. Most of the material out there, we'll just put it nicely and say it could be better presented. It's a big, confusing mess that ends up doing more harm than good to a lot of people. But I finally, after years of study, it clicked, and I got it. And I finally woke up, and I was like, oh my God, everything I thought I knew, everything in this whole freaking world is based on a lie that is so huge and so pervasive, most of us can't even see it's there. There's an old saying that it's much easier to get away with telling a big lie than a small lie. And that is true. This is the great lie that has been told to all of us by our parents, by our teachers, by our governments, over and over and over for untold generations. So much so now that we don't even know it's there. And so essentially, if you've studied law of attraction and energy healing, spiritual work, maybe you've studied philosophy or Buddhism, or that have read the Vedic scriptures, what you'll find is a lot of it is telling us the same thing. They tell us that the key to a life free of suffering is to release attachment to results. Okay, that's true. The question is, how do you do that? They'll say that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. That's true, but how do you do that? They'll say that we are all one. And we hear it from our New Age gurus, and we hear it in church, and we all say, hallelujah, we are all one. And the vast majority of people have no idea what that actually means. And then they just turn around and go right back and live their lives as if we're not. And so I found that a lot of the spiritual work was essentially pointing us to the top of the mountain and saying, go there. And that is correct. It's just not useful, right?
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do was to create material that would show people how to get there, that would give you a step-by-step process to achieve your own genuine spiritual awakening. That really is. It is the beginning of the end of suffering. And once you've achieved that, that is the foundation in truth that can lead to all the highest levels of consciousness. That is the secret to turbocharge your energy healing, your law of attraction, to get phenomenal results beyond anything you could have imagined before. And it really comes down to, obviously, in just an hour, I can't give a thorough coverage of this topic. It's pretty big. But in my program, 30 Days to Awakening, I do give a thorough coverage of it. And essentially, it comes down to understanding the essence of what this you is, this awareness, this consciousness that we all have. What exactly is that? And when you understand that, and only when you understand that, are you able to see through the great lie and see that everything we've been taught is a load of bunk. It's an enormous manipulation. As one non-duality teacher says, most people, even those that are into the New Age and energy healing, don't really want freedom. What they want is to give themselves a bigger prison to let their ego roam around in. And that's because they don't realize they're in prison. And so what I want to offer to everybody is the gift of true spiritual freedom, of a genuine awakening, to understand the truth of what this you is. And it's been so phenomenal because I've been a very voracious reader and student of spiritual work my whole life, even before I had the first experience of energy healing. I've studied the major religions. I've studied a lot of schools of philosophy and metaphysics. And it was all very interesting, but I never really felt I totally got it. I thought I did sometimes, but I wasn't sure. Once you've awakened, once you've seen the truth, all that stuff becomes crystal clear. You can pick up the Bible, you can pick up the Quran, you can pick up the Tao Te Ching, you can look at the Vedic scriptures, you can read treatises from Buddhism, and it makes sense. You'll get it. You go, oh, I know exactly what they mean. And in order to give an idea, there's been some people who have created scales of consciousness. And so we're not going to talk too much about that here. There's some coverage of that in the program for those that are curious. But basically, a simple way of understanding the spiritual journey is to divide it into three phases. In the first phase of the spiritual journey, you are a victim. We are completely 100% dependent on others to take care of us and keep us safe and keep us maintained. We can't do anything for ourselves. So the spiritual journey begins with being a victim. Then, as we mature, we develop basic skills. We learn how to read and write. We learn basic math. We go on to advanced schooling. We learn a trade or get a degree or learn a skill. Then we learn how to manipulate the world to start to get what we want. And so we start to become powerful. And as an adult, that we manifest the victor stage of consciousness. And so for a lot of people, a lot of the law of attraction and energy healing work is really important because it gives you the tools to drag you out of the victim state into the victor state. And that's really important. However, being a victor is not the end of the journey. In fact, it's not even halfway there. And so there is a whole stage of the spiritual journey beyond that. And it's funny that I only understood that intellectually before, because people would say, well, you can make lots of money and be healthy and find love, but ultimately none of that is going to be fulfilling. If you don't agree with that, go talk to anybody who's achieved those things. Go talk to rock stars or billionaires or anybody, and they will all tell you that having money and success is like a drug effect. You feel better for a little while, but then it wears off, and you're right back being the same you that you were before, except now there's a bigger number on your bank statement, right?
Yeah.
So that's the trick, right? And so how do you get past that? We've all heard from our spiritual teachers, well, you're too attached to result. And I realized that for me, I was stuck in so many areas of my life because until you're awakened, it's essentially impossible to release attachment to result. And that will sabotage your life in numerous ways because most of us are creating most of what happens in our lives out of resistance to what we don't want. As an example, if you ask most people at a wealth building seminar, you say, well, why do you want to make all this money? Why do you want to have passive income and be financially free? Usually, not always, but usually the answer you get is, well, because I'm sick of money stress, because I hate my job, or my horrible living situation, or they have to stay in a bad relationship or live with their family, or they are sick of having to scramble every month just to make ends meet and make the minimum payments on their credit card, and so on and so forth. You notice that all those motivations are resistance, that most of us want to make money to get away from the things we don't like. And so that's attachment to result. And so how do you get past that? That's a big trick, isn't it? And so I finally found the answer. And again, it really is the beginning of the end of suffering. It really is the foot in the door to enlightenment. And so awakening is the transition from the victor state, where you're stuck in your ego, trying to fulfill its desires, to the vehicle state, which is the whole second half of the journey of consciousness. In the vehicle state, you're able to let go of the attachment to result and be present, to be embodied in this moment as a vehicle of divine will. That is the key. And as long as you think you're this you that you think you are, that can never happen. You could spend 1 million lifetimes studying with gurus. And until you wake up and understand the essence of what this you is, this consciousness, this awareness that we think is inside, as long as you think it's what everyone thinks it is, you will never make that transition. And there's been a lot of talk in spiritual work about how do you make that leap. On the Hawkins scale, the victor state goes to 499, and the vehicle starts from 500 to 1,000. And there's been a lot of talk. How do you make that leap? How do you get out of rationality? 499 is the calibration of genius. That's the top end of the victor scale. That's mastery. And the difference is awakening. As long as you're stuck living from ego, your life will be primarily a series of manipulations to try to get the world to give you what you want and avoid what you don't want. And so, for the most part, we do energy healing and go to doctors and use the law of attraction in order to get the world around us to change. In other words, we are obsessed with manipulating the content of our life. And so when you awaken and make that journey from the victor to the vehicle, you will let go of the need to constantly manipulate the content of your life. Instead, you'll be more focused on the relationship you have to the content of your life. In other words, instead of the question, how do I get more money in my bank account? The question will be, okay, this is how much money I have. How is this affecting me? how do I embody wealth consciousness no matter what's happening on the outside? And so that is a little taste of freedom, because real freedom means that it does not matter one bit what happens outside of you. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You will feel wealthy and abundant and prosperous all the time, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're in good health, because you will feel wonderful and connected all the time, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're in love in a relationship or alone or going through a breakup, because you will feel connected and loved and adored all the time, no matter what. And this is so important because, ironically, letting go of the victor's need to manipulate is the key to personal power. Because only when you let go of the need to manipulate can you let go of the resistance, the attachment to result. And that's why I would say that awakening for me has been by far the most profound and important spiritual experience of my whole life, much more so than when my elbow miraculously healed. That was great. It was exactly what I needed at the time to make a change. But I then went on to spend the next 10 years learning how to use energy healing and the law of attraction from ego to try to manipulate the world to give me what I wanted. And when I awakened, that really is the key to freedom. I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that once you have really begun to awaken, it will make all the other things you do, all your energy healing, all your law of attraction processes, between 10 and 1,000 times more powerful. Because the ego won't be running the show trying to madly manipulate everything around it. Once you've awakened and your life is grounded into spiritual truth, instead of this flimsy foundation of the great lie, that's when the really good stuff happens.
That definitely is when the good stuff happens. And this is, your program is 30 days. Am I correct?
Right. I designed it. It's called 30 Days to Awakening. Several days of bonus material, so it's more than that, but the first 30 is most of it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How is that possible when, people hear awakening and they're like, well, this awakening takes forever. So how is that even possible?
Yeah, and so awakening is a little different than total enlightenment.
Okay.
So awakening is an insight and understanding of spiritual truth. Enlightenment is a fully embodied awakening. And so embodiment is a really key aspect of this. And I've learned so much about embodiment in the last 5 years, because it's one thing to learn a technique or a principle or a theory, but it's another to live that way. Most of us have a lot of knowledge in our heads that hasn't been embodied. So, for example, we go to church or we go listen to our New Age gurus, and they'll tell us that we are all one and be kind to others and we're all connected. And then we get in our car to drive home and someone cuts in front of us and we scream at them and flip them off. Well, clearly you have the knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, but you didn't embody it, right?
Yeah.
And so the embodiment of awakening is enlightenment. And so it's occasional, it's rare. It occasionally happens that someone awakens and pops immediately into that nirvana state. A great example we've probably heard of is Eckhart Tolle. He was sitting on the park bench, contemplating the nature of consciousness, asking himself, what is this you, this me inside of me that I think I am? And he got it. He awakened in that moment, and he popped and went all the way to the enlightened state and laid on a park bench for 6 months in ecstasy. Then he had to let go of that a little bit to come back down to earth so he could teach this to other people. And so enlightenment is the embodiment of awakening. But awakening, as one of my teachers like to say, is the foot in the door to enlightenment. And once you get your foot in that door can never close again. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take you to embody it so it opens up wide and invites you in. And so when it's taught properly, awakening can absolutely be achieved in 30 days. In fact, it's only going to take most people 10 to 15 minutes a day for 30 days. And it is literally, as it says in the title, it is thousands of years of spiritual wisdom condensed into 10 simple daily healings and insights. And the reason I made it 30 days is this is really deep stuff. This will turn your brain inside out. And so I want everyone to just take a little bit each day and in the instructions for the program, or to go over the stuff more than once, at least twice. And so every day there's written material as well as an audio. So I want everyone to read it and listen to it as many times as you need to. And so during the program, we cover a lot of amazing topics. We start with prerequisites to awakening.
So this sounds amazing, and I want to get into it further in a second. Can you share with us some of the amazing turnarounds that I know you have seen from people who are working with this?
Sure, absolutely.
Great.
One thing that I've seen in a lot of people is one of the embodiment tools that's included in the special offer is the consciousness shifting training. And so this is not awakening itself. This is a tool to help you embody the awakening. And consciousness shifting is something that it took me forever. I literally spent 5 years and about $250,000 on master teachers and healers and retreats and supplements to learn how to do this. And so it's a matter of tuning the energy of your consciousness so you can start to see energy with your open eyes. And so that is not awakening, but that's a tool to embody it, because you actually start to see and feel viscerally that there is connection, that there is no separation. And when you literally watch people disappear and see the energy behind it, you go, oh my gosh, this is real. This isn't just something I'm imagining. This is something I'm seeing with my open eyes. And I've had dozens of people tell me, oh my gosh, I've been working for years trying to see energy. Then I started using the consciousness shifting training video, and bingo. I started to see auras. I started to see energy. It started to happen for me. So that's just one little side benefit. Again, that is not awakening itself. That's like some gravy that gets poured on top.
Right.
So that's one little piece. I've had a lot of people tell me that their fear and worry significantly decreases. They'll say, oh my gosh, the last 5 years of my life, I've just been stressed out of my mind about money and debt. Or they've been sick and they're worried about pain, or even worried about dying. Most of that starts to disappear, because remember that awakening is the beginning of the end of suffering. And when you've awakened and you understand the truth of this you that you think is sitting inside your head having experiences, then you realize there's nothing to be afraid of. So that's an important piece of it. Another important piece of it, which is hard to overstate the importance, is we go deeply into the question of fate or free will. And that's something that I never really seriously explored, because after I got into energy healing and the law of attraction, it seemed obvious to me that it was all based on free will. And so there's several days when we delve deeply into the nature of truth. We explore the higher dimensional nature of our reality. We learn how multiple contradictory truths can coexist at the same time. And I answer completely, comprehensively, once and for all, the answer to the question, fate or free will. We will answer that once and for all. And a lot of people ask me, well, am I awakened already? There's two easy ways to know that. If you've seen a radical decrease in suffering in your life, where you're just fully present without a lot of worry or stress or fear, yeah, that's an indicator. The second is, once you've fully awakened, the answer to fate or free will is glaringly obvious. Glaringly obvious. So as long as you're wondering about that, that's a symptom. Maybe there's a little more there. There's more levels. Because a lot of people think that awakening is learning about energy and talking to angels and using mind power. It's not. It's far more profound. It is the essence of this you that you are. And so it's going to shock a lot of people. If you've been into New Age thinking, you probably are pretty clear, at least in your head, that you're not your body, that you're not even your mind. But I'm going to go even further and challenge the listeners by saying you are not a soul. You are not a spiritual being. That's all part of the great lie. And only after a genuine awakening will you kind of laugh and understand all this other stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. In the same way that there's nothing wrong with a bunch of 4-year-olds playing in a sandbox. But it's just a game being played in a sandbox, right? And you'll see a lot of the teachings and techniques and all that are just that. Once you've awakened and you understand the truth, some of it may seem a little silly. But again, there's nothing wrong with having fun or feeling good, right?
Yeah.
There's 2 reasons a lot more people are not awakened. Number one is, at least until recently, most of the material on non-duality, it doesn't make any sense. You know, I'm a pretty smart guy, and I would read it over and over again and not get it.
Right.
And so I've worked really hard to make it really clear and really easy for people. Second thing is, one of the tricks to this program is I used my own technology to facilitate awakening. And so part of what you get in 30 Days to Awakening are a set of block clearing programs that will go in and automatically clear blocks in your subconscious mind to being open to awakening and spiritual truth.
Wow.
So that is almost like cheating, because the reason a lot of people don't get it or they don't connect to the right material is they have blocks. And so the program will actually guide you through the process of automatically clearing those blocks to create a good foundation for awakening. One of my teachers, I studied with him for years intensively. He's the one that taught me how to see energy. He would say to me over and over again, Brent, there's nobody here. And I didn't really get it. And then after awakening, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it. Now I know exactly what Carl was trying to tell me that 4,000 times he told me there's nobody here. So if you hear that and you know exactly what I mean with 100% crystal clarity, then you may already be awakened. But most of us aren't. And so because this was literally the single most profound and most important spiritual experience of my entire life, I had to go and create this program. In fact, I had been creating my own training and certification program. I put it on hold and threw it in the trash. Because after I awakened, I realized I couldn't be teaching people how to use ego to manipulate with energy anymore. It was ridiculous. It's like a cat chasing its tail. It was time for me to grow up, put on my spiritual big boy pants, and I completely revamped and recreated and redesigned everything I was teaching with this as a foundation.
Wow.
This is the key. I mean, this is the piece that put it all together that I get. I almost get bored a little bit now because I've reread all the famous spiritual works, and now I totally get it. There's no more mystery. And it's also the beginning of the end of seeking. So those that are seekers, you might have to be willing to let that go. Because as Saint Germain said, that which you are seeking is that which is seeking. Once you've awakened, once you've gone through this program, I guarantee you will understand exactly what he means by that. And just like the game in the sandbox, a lot of us will put down the seeking because we see it's no longer necessary. Because that which you are seeking has been here all along. Those are just a few of the things you're going to get out of this.
Wow. What you've put together is really, really exciting. So everyone, we've made it really simple for you. You can just click on the special offer button that's on this page, and that will take you right there. And now that you're there, Brent, if you could talk us through what we're going to find there, that would be great.
Sure. So the centerpiece of the program, the reason that I would hope most people would want to get it is this 30 Days to Awakening program. And so it has a 30-day series of articles and audios that take you step by step through giving you everything you need to know to experience a genuine spiritual awakening. Most people get their aha moment somewhere between day 6 and day 10. For others, it may happen later in the program. But trust me, once you've had a genuine awakening, you're going to have a good long laugh because you realize that so much of your stress and worry just doesn't exist. It's just ridiculous. And it really is, again, it is the beginning of the end of suffering. It's the foot in the door to enlightenment. So that's the main portion of the program, is those 30-some days of articles and audios. In addition, you'll also get the block clearing programs. So in the block clearing programs, facilitates awakening and spiritual progress by clearing subconscious blocks and putting in the right software into your subconscious. It's almost like cheating, but it's really powerful. You'll also get the trauma clearing program, which is important because not every block is going to clear instantly every time, the first time. So the trauma clearing program is your second line of defense, because I want to make sure that between 99 and 100% of these blocks are gone. So that's another tool you use in case something doesn't clear the first time. In addition to that, you'll also get the consciousness shifting training video. Me and one of the others got together and made this training for you. That will give you a piece of the embodiment of awakening, to give you a visceral experience of feeling and seeing these intellectual truths that you're learning from the articles and videos. So that's like the experiential piece. This is the gateway to true meditation. Like a lot of listeners, I've been doing yoga and meditating and breath work for decades. I was doing it all wrong. No one had ever taught me proper true meditation. And it's totally different than what you think. For one, it's usually never done with the eyes closed. You do it eyes open. And for two, you don't try to control your mind or empty it. So I'm not going to say more now, but I got hung up and I hated meditating for so long because I thought I was so bad at it because no one taught me right. So this is your gateway to true meditation, to the embodiment of awakening, to experiencing and seeing and feeling truth, rather than just knowing true things. And you'll also get a couple of my other programs I've created that are smaller but really important. You'll get the Mastering Attention and Dissolving Pain series. Those are both included. That's so important because most of us had little or no training in how to use our awareness. And so most of us are essentially at a kindergarten level of using our awareness. We get stuck in a very primitive and simple way of using it and live and die our entire lives having no idea that this awareness, this consciousness inside of you is capable of far more than you realize, far more. So I'm going to lead you into that. That is another piece of the embodiment of awakening. The Dissolving Pain builds on Mastering Attention and shows you how to use your attention, use your awareness to dissolve any pain, physical or emotional. I have used every kind of pain relief technique, breath work, supplement, prescription pharmaceutical, energy healing technique, meditative technique. I've learned all of them to deal with pain. I lived in chronic pain for 20 years. And this is by far, head and shoulders, the most powerful, the easiest, and the fastest. This Dissolving Pain is what I use to completely heal myself of migraine headaches that were plaguing me and wrecking my life. So I wanted to include that. In addition, you'll get a lot of bonus pieces. Those that are familiar with my work, you may have seen some of these before. You'll get my book, Where Science Meets Spirit. You'll get the muscle testing video. You'll get the deep theta meditation audios. You'll get a half-price coupon if you want to come to my live trainings, which I'm very excited that now I am doing them both as live events in Los Angeles and live streaming around the world. So you no longer have to come to Los Angeles. From here on forward, by the time you hear this, they will be available live streamed so people anywhere in the world can come to my classes and learn how to create miracles in just a couple days. And you'll also get the 30-day $1 trial to my VIP club. And so the VIP club I put in because of the simple recognition that no matter how hard I work, no pre-recorded program can ever answer all your questions and help you solve all the problems of all the things that come up in life. And so the VIP club I created specifically to give frequent live access to me from my members. And so several times a month I do live events. I give away sessions to the members. I let people listen in. I do group healing events. I create special event material every month based on the members' needs. I answer questions in the forums. And so essentially the VIP club is your ongoing live access to me at a very low price and a ton of content in order to keep you focused on your spiritual journey and give you the tools you need to embody your awakening. Because remember that awakening is the understanding, it's the insight. That's the foot in the door to the enlightenment. Once you awaken, everything starts to shift. But the really good stuff comes during the embodiment process. That's when your body will start to heal because you're no longer in resistance to illness. That's when money will start flowing in because you're no longer in resistance to poverty. That's when your love life really starts to blossom because you're no longer in resistance to being alone or in a bad relationship. So I'm hoping that the listeners will start with 30 Days to Awakening. And if you like it, check out the VIP club and maybe come to the training classes. I try really hard to make this the absolute best value under the sun.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible what you've put together here. Let me ask you this. When we start working with this, what are some of the things that we could expect to start experiencing pretty quickly?
First thing that will happen is when you start to awaken will be a sense of confusion. And that's because it actually made me nauseous.
Wow.
At first I got an exhilaration because I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it. And it was exhilarating. And I was, up to like 3 a.m. because I was so excited. I'm like, I get it. Oh my gosh, I get it. Then the next day, I realized that my whole life had been built on a lie. And it made me nauseous because I realized that these things I thought were so true, these lies that were so big and so pervasive, I had no idea they were there. And I realized that so much of my life was built on this foundation of a lie. So much of what I was trying to do was just the ego manipulating and scheming and planning. And I finally saw it, and it made me a little sick. But that was okay, because after that, the most common thing that people report post-awakening is they notice their fears and stresses start to dissipate. So the decrease in money, stress, and worry is probably the biggest one. The second one that comes a lot is people say, you know what, I'm not afraid of dying anymore.
Interesting.
Because that fear of death is very deeply encoded into us. And as long as you think you're this you that you've been trained to think you are, it's not going anywhere. But when you awaken and you really understand the truth that there is nobody here, and the question of fate or free will makes you laugh because it's so obvious. And so a lot less money stress, a lot less stress about death or dying. And in addition, a lot less worry about other people. For me, having a young son, he's 3 years old as we record this interview, what I realized was that I was much more attached to his life than I was to my own. And it created incredible suffering for me, worrying about all the things that might happen, right? You hear all these terrible horror stories of all these things that happen to kids or even to adults. Awakening really took a big bite out of that. And I kind of laugh and go, wow, me worrying about my son, that's just another game in the sandbox. And the awakened person can still play all those same games, but you're playing them from consciousness instead of from ego. Whole different ballgame.
Right, of course.
No pre-recorded program could answer all your questions or handle everything that comes up. So I'm hoping you'll check out the program, again, for $97. If you don't like it, once you have your foot in the door to enlightenment, the door is never going to shut.
Very, very cool. Everyone click on that special offer button that is on the page, and you'll be taken right there. And Brent, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today. This is so exciting. I'm excited for what you're sharing with us, as well as I am excited for you. And I really appreciate you, and I look forward to our next call together.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And everyone listening, thank you so much for being here. I love spending this time with you. And until the next time, keep manifesting. Bye-bye, everyone.